phrase that the Buddha used, Kalyana Mitra, Kalyana Mitta, or Mitra. So Kalyana Mitra or Mitta is translated as spiritual friendship often, but it's more literally, it's a friend who is both virtuous and knowledgeable. Friends that are virtuous, meaning good for us in terms of the effect, the virtuous effect that they have on us, and also the knowledge that they have to share with us. Kalyana Mitra. So the value of Kalyana Mitra is what. So here, Ajahn Sucitto calls these people, and how we become these people, more importantly. Not just that we go looking for spiritual guides or spiritual friends. The basic meaning is friend, but then often, and this is understood as someone who knows more than we do. So they are teachers. But as the chapter shows, there are so many layers to understanding what this teacher, what this friend is. In fact, Ajahn Sucitto says, it begins with yourself. You have to make friends with yourself. You have to recognize how you can be a virtuous and knowledgeable guide to yourself if you develop those qualities, if you build up those qualities. And in fact, building up those qualities doesn't have to be so difficult, because he doesn't explicitly state this, but throughout this book, maybe you already can get a sense that he does come from a position that believes that there is basic goodness in all of us. Because of the tradition of Buddhism that he comes from, the Theravada tradition, they don't necessarily have a kind of worked out concept that immediately translate to basic goodness. In fact, in that tradition, by and large, they avoid this issue of, by nature, are you good or are you bad? Relatively speaking, within the Buddhist family, the Theravada tradition is most comfortable emphasizing the developmental model of understanding who we are, what we are, rather than what you may call the discovery model. Like there is some kind of core, some kind of essence that is good or bad, according to some. Not within the Buddhist family. The Buddhist family would not go so far as to assert no cousins in this family, no uncles in this family, no parallel, branch of the family that would say, oh, by nature, we are bad. Either there's no such thing as by nature, or by nature, we are good. Those are the only two positions within the Buddhist family. So in the, just as a footnote, in the Theravada tradition, generally speaking, there is no clearly articulated sense of, oh, by nature, you're good. But again, if you read this book, you can see that he is operating from a position of trusting that there is basic goodness. And because there is basic goodness, and then without needing to philosophize that or concretize that into, no matter what you do, you will still be good. He would not go in that direction. But he does say, in order to cultivate this virtue, it's not that hard. It can come easy if we pay attention, develop deep attention, skillful attention, appropriate attention, right? Because there's a fine line at a certain point where skillful, appropriate attention turns into obsession, fixation. So when we say deep attention, don't imagine this at all moments you are watching, Then you can become paranoid, whether it's God watching you at all moments and know what you're doing, or Santa, or even your own mind needs to be watching all the time, right? We're not talking about that. That's not skillful attention. That's not appropriate attention. That's neurotic attention. So along those lines, in the work of developing skillful attention, deep attention, appropriate attention, he advocates cultivating goodwill or loving kindness, often translated as loving kindness. In this book, he generally uses the word goodwill. And this is the Pali metta, or in Sanskrit is called maitri, loving kindness, which is friendliness. In fact, Kalyana Mitra, Mitra and Maitri, or Mitta and Metta are related. They have the same root. It means to be friendly. So to have the warmness of heart towards, first, yourself. Develop the ability to have this warmness of heart towards yourself. Now, you say, but which self? Right? And if you've read enough Buddhist things, you may say, but didn't Buddha say there is no self? Yeah. Actually, this approach, not concerned about that, because those are just philosophical statements. That's for the, introduction to world religions class or introduction to Buddhism class that you have to take. One course to be literate, but these days they have thrown out all rules, so no more. Do whatever heck you want, right? Personal freedom is really important. Well, so we say. So anyway, don't fixate on, Buddha says there's no self. In fact, if anything, this book says, it's not so much that you walk around believing there's no self, there's no self. Many of us think, to be a good, legitimate, card-carrying Buddhist, I need to have the position of, there's no self. There's no self. But here the emphasis, right, throughout this whole course, is throughout this whole course, and because throughout this whole book, is to say, pay attention to how, where there is really no unchanging self, we are busy, right, creating self. We are constantly fabricating self where there isn't one there. So this process of fabricating self, and once a self has been fabricated, put together, right, then it takes on a life of its own. Then it begins to put into place what he calls programs, which is habit patterns. And these habit patterns, they begin to feed themselves and keep this program going. And that is where we go from experiences, no doubt linked, yes, cause and effect of experiences, right? Qualities, both positive and negative, that turn up, right? On the basis of what is essentially in flux and changing, we commit to this notion of this is who I am, and this is how I am. And once this is who I am and this is what I am is firmly in place, then of course this is how you are, this is how they are, also take up their position. And the thing is, we lose track of this. We forget the relational, right? The relational aspect of how self and other came to be. Then we have amnesia. We forgot, that it's just conditions being present, and then we put a label on it, and then that label starts printing itself. These label printers just keep going. Pretty soon you believe, oh, that must be real. And no awareness at all. No understanding at all. The karma, the cause and effect that underlies this whole show, this whole drama. And so, throughout this book, within different contexts, is calling our attention to pay attention to how the cause and effect turns up here, turns up here, turns up here, turns up here. So it's not a bad thing, actually, that we have this tendency of creating programs and the programs kind of taking over. Even that is not necessarily where the problem is. The problem is not seeing how all of this happens, and from not seeing how all of this happens, have some erroneous ideas about the status of what it is that we're talking about. So anyway, today's topic is the karma, the causality, the cause and effect of relationship. So in case you have not read this chapter yet, and I hope I'm not disappointing you, this is not the Cliff Notes version of that book called If the Buddha Dated. No, really, there is such a book. Maybe some of you have read it. You don't need to tell us you have read it, but that's okay. Yeah? It says, if the Buddha dated. It's like, okay. No, it's not. This chapter is not a short version of that. This chapter is really talking about, when we talk about these spiritual friends, what are we talking about? Then these spiritual friends are found within the spiritual community. So he calls this the community of value. So it's literally is the field of merit. And in the traditional context, this expression, the field of merit, is often used to describe the monastic community. That the monastic community, which is necessarily small in relation to the non-monastic community, but they are to be regarded as fields of merit meaning if you plant in these fields, they produce merit. And so, admittedly, in traditional Buddhist societies, this has also become a powerful idea to support monastic life. Because monastic life, at its root, isn't organized on the basis of producing goods. Yeah? And it's so counter, right? Our values. You got to be productive, right? And the most basic form of production, they say no. They cut off biological production. Then they cut off economic production. So they don't produce. That's the Buddhist monastic. So we don't have a tradition of, monasteries selling fruitcakes or, bourbon. They don't produce, And so they don't produce, but they are called fields of merit. So Ajahn Sucitto is using this notion of fields of merit to expand it to not just monastic community, but how to think in terms of the community that we want to build, the community that we want to be a part of, to think of that as a field of merit, a community of value. And inside this community, within this community, we are to relate to each other and build our relationships with this concept of Kalyana Mitta, spiritual friends. And how to extend this, right, to beyond the spiritual context, so that it's not just when you come to a Buddhist center or you go to a spiritual gathering that you feel spiritual and therefore these are spiritual friends, but even within the family, within the neighborhood, within the workplace, how can we contribute to building a field of merit, right? Rather than to go into our social lives, our public lives, looking to exploit each other, which is really often how things are configured. So this is an invitation to really look into how can we, wherever we are, now let's not have, your theme song come on so immediately and visions of grandeur, right? I'm going to go start this community of value in my neighborhood. And then, of course, you walk up and down your neighborhood telling them you want to start the community of value, and most people ignore you. Now you're upset. Now you're angry. How can they not like this community of value, right? That's not how you build this community of value. He gives, food for thought of how do we build this community of value? How do we create these fields of merit? As long as there is self and other, there is already there a potential to build a field of merit. Starting with the other that is you, but currently sort of is an other. So we can start with all those parts of you that you don't like. All those parts of you that you're not comfortable with. All those parts of you that you would rather not have. Start with those yous. We're in the South. Yous. All these yous You can start with that. And how do we have a community of value there? How do we have a field of merit there? What kind of karma is necessary to build a community of value within yourself? Right? So here, on page 139, he highlights for this field of value, for this field of merit, he says to belong to such a community. Right? So now zoom out, not just with yourself, but also in the broader sense of with other people. He says to belong to such a community entails steady practice. So you cannot, turn up at a community and demand that people now accept you. That's not how. Right? It happens, It demands, it entails steady practice. Yeah. So first thing is, I would say, don't go to any community seeking validation. Even if you have this sense of lack, try to lay that aside. It's kind of a chicken and egg. You're like, well, the reason I come here is I want to overcome this feeling of lack. But if you just try to overcome the feeling of lack by hoping that, because this is a spiritual community, they have to love me, it's not going to work. Why is it not going to work? Because it's not even whether people will love you or will not love you, will accept you or will not accept you. Until you have some understanding of the karma that is involved, no matter how people are acting, you are not going to be able to reciprocate, even if they are giving love and care and friendship. Because we are at war with ourselves. And we have no understanding that that's what's going on. Yeah? So anyway, here he says, steady practice. It means that rather than compete, compare, and focus on each other's personal idiosyncrasies, we attune to the bright karma in ourselves and others, and develop through acting and interacting in its light, in the light of bright karma. And so you want, this is not so that, you become a saint. This is so that you have a chance of gaining basic sanity. That you do not, go and compete and compare and focus on each other's personal idiosyncrasies, but instead we attune to the bright karma in ourselves and in others. To see and respect the good in ourselves and to be keen to live that out. This is the first quality. In Pali is called hiri. Hiri is literally, it's like having a sense of. So it's. I just want to show you, how Ajahn Sucitto is very skillful in actually translating, because if he gives a literal translation, it will communicate wrongly. Literally, it means having modesty or a sense of shame. Works well, actually, in many Asian society, to phrase it that way. But in this culture, if we put it that way, it triggers all sorts of things. Here it's, he is stating it as, right, conscience, which means to see and to see and respect the good in ourselves and to be keen to live that out. That's how he defines conscience. To have a conscience. It's no need to focus on, to know what is right and wrong. But rather, to recognize and respect the good in yourself and to be keen to live that out. I know I want to be good. I know it feels good, to be good. But I don't always live up to that. It's okay. But you want to be keen about it. Like, oh, it would be so good if how I feel I can find ways of manifesting in my speech, in my actions. Then next, right? Then to see and respect the good in others and to be keen to live in accordance with that. That is called ottappa, which is concern. And this is, extended to others. Conscience and concern are called the guardians of the world. And as long as we listen to their advice, our personal world is aligned to the integrity and empathy that support awakening. So in Thai temples, Buddhist temples, often there are two guardian figures at the entrance. And so they say, this is Hiri and Ottappa. Kind of embodied into like this powerful creature, standing at the door. That is a reminder that we should have Hiri and Ottappa. We can lose touch with that integrity and empathy if we neglect valuing our own actions and those of others. This devaluing occurs when we see each other not as fellow subjects, but as objects compounded of wishful fantasy or anxiety. The seeing of another through one's own tinted lens is the self and other program. In this way of seeing, often, right, we expect other people to embody our ideals. Everything can be so simple if they see things my way. And consequently get critical when they don't live up to them. We might also project our fears onto others, or imagine that everyone else is enlightened or near it, and we are far behind in that group. That's also not healthy. We are the laggards of the group. Or that people expect us to be something we're not. That we believe that people expect us. We're not even talking about like people expect us. We believe that people expect us to be something that we are not. All of these are negative mental karma. The mind has adopted a view that divides us into what is us into self and other. Rather than seeing that we are in the same boat. Often, someone smiling or not smiling, when they see us, or someone acknowledging or not acknowledging us, we very quickly, have a story for it. The closer to the truth is probably everyone is too obsessed with themselves to bother to cause you any problems. That's probably closer to the truth. Yeah? Like very few people actually take the trouble to bring trouble to you. But we don't necessarily believe that or think like that. We think that they go out of their way. I mean, just look at yourself. How frequently do you go out of your way to inconvenience others? You're like, but I'm different. I don't do that, but I'm surrounded by people who do that. They go out of their ways to inconvenience me. Well, is that likely? I mean, just consider that. Is that likely? Probably not. Probably others are not that different from you. Which is, we don't go out of our ways, for the most part, to inconvenience others, much less to cause harm to others. But what we do is lacking awareness, lacking mindfulness, going about our lives, we bump into other people. We bump into other people. And that's probably true for most of us. There are exceptions, The human race is huge. Surely there are exceptions. But, the likelihood is all of us are just going about our lives. So remember us. And not immediately, give over to the self and other programming. Yeah? Of course, it is not that all aspects of anyone's behavior are flawless, or that we ourselves always see things from an undistorted perspective. But how else can good qualities arise if we don't acknowledge our potential for them? It is not as if we can make goodness appear when there isn't a basis. So the field of value, the community of value, offers the common ground in any misunderstanding. That common ground is remembered and brought into play whenever we touch into the qualities of integrity and empathy in ourselves. In this next section, called the relational vortex, page 141, becoming, conceit, and proliferation. Self and other is a divisive program for sure. He reminds us this again. So if we lean into, look closely, appropriate attention, if we pay attention, then this is what we can see, okay? With the arising of consciousness, so the moment we are conscious of something, our sense of being something is established on the sense of being within something. as early as being within a womb, a family, a nation, a world order, and so on. This is how it happens. Operating through the physical senses and the object defining mind, consciousness is always consciousness of. That's how we experience consciousness. It's always conscious of something. A sight, sound, touch, thought, and so on. Consciousness, therefore, gives rise to contact. With contact comes the experience of being contacted. What is he talking about? Heart impressions occur. When the eye sees, sight. When the nose smells, odor. When the tongue tastes. What happens in that moment of contact is heart impressions occur. Thus, relational awareness, citta as heart, gets activated. The heart experiences feeling and felt sense and wants to be safe, stable, and comfortable. And this program of the formation of these heart impressions, this citta, forms a subject that is being affected by an object. It also kindles a psychological craving to solidify into a subject who feels secure and comfortable. Then, as this craving for being something is contextual, it orients around oneself and one's body, oneself and one's territory, oneself and one's role or job, but above all, it orients around oneself and other people. We want to know who we are and who others are and where we stand, not just to learn how to work together, but in order to establish a secure identity. We are looking for security because we fear this seeming lack of security, which is that the self that we have created is created out of momentary experiences. And not recognizing that pushes us to try to solidify the commonsensical necessary self, as I would say, the self that goes to the store, the self that gets in the car, the self that forgot the keys. That's the commonsensical self. No problem, you know. It's the exaggerated self that is where the problem is. So then, seemingly, mysteriously, without rhyme or reason, this self turns up, and then it bullies everything into its wants. Yeah? From this relational vortex of self and other, there thus arises the notion of a personal self, holding a body as a boundary and being locked into programs that juggle with the variables of the social world. This is what is called self-view. The self doesn't, this kind of self can never exist. But the view, the belief, the opinion that such a self exists is what plagues us. It's where the culprit is. Yeah? Yes.
So the idea of interdependence
Mm-hmm.
is present even before birth. We're dependent upon a mother. We're dependent upon
Yes.
family and so on and
Yes.
so forth.
Yes.
So is the issue here is failing to see that we're interdependent with whatever it is we're seeing.
Yes.
And if we can keep that in mind, we won't concretize.
Right. Yeah. You don't need to get rid of experiences, you know. You don't need actually to get rid of happy moments and sad moments. It's when these things turn up and we lose track of the compounded nature of experiences, of the truth of what's going on, right? That's where the problem is. That's where the problem is. Birth will still happen, old age will still happen, sickness will happen, death will happen. Right? But the suffering that arises from these four things, that's negotiable. Yeah? That's negotiable. That's not a given, or doesn't have to be a given. But you have to steady the heart. I mean, intellectually, I think we can all accept that. Although, maybe not. I hear that, some very wealthy people are hoping that, they can freeze their body in 50 years, They're seriously, they're investing a lot of money so that if they die and they have not found this yet, their body can be frozen. And then 20 years later, they'll find a secret, I don't know. It's just not very appealing to me. Like living forever? I guess it's okay. Different people can have different wants. That's the whole point of these teachings, I suppose. But just, it's like, I used to say, like, if I was God, and if there's such a thing, right? Meaning like God, all-powerful, eternal, all of that, right? If I was God, the first thing I'll do is kill myself. Not to be morbid, not to encourage self-harm, okay? That's not, okay, big footnote, okay? Just to give you an insight of like the way I think about, living forever. It's like, ay. No. No, thank you, right? (143) If what we are born into is giving us messages of welcome and trust, then our references and programs get formed on a foundation of basic confidence in being here. But if it is the other way around, if we have been fed biases, exaggerations, and falsehoods, if we are told by our family or society that we are worthless, a threat, or an expendable burden, we become insecure and confused and possibly violent. If we get the message that we have to be productive, intelligent, and attractive, then even though we may personally acquire those qualities, we do so from a basis of anxiety. And hence still experience that not good enough sense. So if our intrinsic worth isn't valued, right? No hiri. We have to seek value through achievement, through know-how, physical appearance, rebellious independence, and so on. In such cases, the relational basis is replaced by strong individuation. Do it and get it by yourself, with a weak feeling for sharing, empathy, and integration with others. But how can a self be separate from others? Instead, the urge for a strong, successful, and independent self is a condition for narcissism, arrogance, and relational dysfunctionality. History is full of brilliant but neurotic geniuses, egocentric power mongers, and psychopaths with formidable powers of mind. Because that basic lack that they experience, that they don't recognize, that it's not actually basic lack. It's just how it is. It's not a problem to be solved. And of course, if you grew up with conditions, that unknowingly keeps feeding that, then of course, you produce this kind of world. That's the karma of this kind of world. So we have to choose, what kind of world we want. Here, right now, just between you and yourself. What kind of world do you want? It is worse still if we can't achieve value through our own individual efforts. We experience ourselves as worthless. And if the judge of self-worth is our own performance-driven psychology, there's always a better or higher that we can imagine becoming. So we never come out as winners. This loss of worth or sense of being driven can result in breakdowns, depression, substance abuse, and even suicide. He then, in the next page, talked about reading this game played by a tribe in the Amazon. I'm often suspicious, I didn't look up to see. There's always some mysterious tribe somewhere in the Amazon or, wherever that kind of have this weird behavior that is a lesson for all of us. Let's just pretend, it's a good lesson. So he said that a British field worker was observing this game that they could not understand, which is, like any game, there's two teams. But it seems like these two teams, they're not equally divided. Seemingly the game can start with, more people in one team and less people in another team. And what are they doing? He noticed that the players of the game would each team would grab a large log and hoisting it onto their shoulders, start running towards a point 100 meters or so ahead. And the logs were not the same size or weight. Okay? It's like, what's going on? So two teams. As he watched, one team would draw ahead of the other, and as it did so, a member of the leading team would leave his or her team and join the other team. And if a team was in the lead, members of that team would peel off and join the losing team. As the finishing line drew into sight, the excitement would rise until the teams crossed the line, often with very little distance between them. Eventually, he figured out the goal of this game is for everyone to arrive at the same time. no losers. That aim was carried out through attention and strenuous effort, but with an overriding benevolent intent to arrive at a place with no winners and no losers. And so I can imagine this game. It will only work if you want to get there. So you can't like, I don't really want to get there. Then there's no game. So there is, he doesn't elaborate here, but I can just imagine for this game to be meaningful, right? There's probably like what you're challenging each time is how soon can we all get there, right? You're breaking that record. You're fighting. How you win is how soon can we all arrive at the same time. So there's that drive, that excitement. But then you win by kind of having a goal and yet willing to fall back and not get to your goal, but ultimately getting to your goal. Expanding our attention and intention to include others gives us plenty to work on. But bear in mind that relationship also includes how we relate to ourselves. One can avoid or suppress anxiety or self-criticism to a degree, but that gets more difficult to do when one meditates. So instead, for many people, when they start meditating, they may ask, what should I do? How am I doing? What comes next? Watch that. Because we may be bringing, our sense of like accomplishing into this work and then distorting it. This is the uncertainty that also plays out in relationship with others. Am I acceptable to him or her? What do they see me as? Then the thirst for becoming forms self and other based on anxiety. This crystallization is what the Buddha called conceit. The process that weaves qualities that arise in one's awareness into entities that apparently exist independently. Again, it's not that these qualities are not real. They are real enough. But instead of just recognizing them as merely impersonal qualities, situationally arising, instead of just that, right? The process that weaves qualities that arise in one's awareness into entities that apparently exist independently. Along with conceit come the comparisons and shifting hierarchies that form the view. I am this and the other is that. Or I'm feeling this, but I should feel something else. And from that foundation of thirst, conceit and the view that I am this, but I should be that, this process is what we call proliferation. In those of you familiar with Tibetan Buddhism and how these terms are translated, this is what we normally call conceptual thoughts. Proliferation of that. So again, and from that foundation of thirst, thirsting for experience, grasping, in other words, Trishna, which is identified as the cause of suffering, second noble truth. So that thirst, from that foundation of thirst, conceit and the view. And what is conceit? The process that weaves qualities that arise in one's awareness into entities. That's conceit. Yeah? So conceit and the view that I'm this, but I should be that. This is the beginning of this proliferation. Prapancha, conceptual thoughts. Making and adopting views of self is a basis for mental karma, and mental karma, for good or for bad, is no small matter. Moreover, from the unawakened heart, this mental karma occurs by default. That is, the karma of becoming and conceit takes its cues from the old karma of the mental tendency that is dominant at the time. In the case of someone who grew up in a family or society that didn't see value as being intrinsic to being human, but rather gave the message that what you are isn't good enough, the tendency is to feel anxious and unwelcome. And that affects the way you configure yourself and others. So when we don't see, right, the causality that is going on, then we quickly fall into, this is real, that is real. But they're all exaggerations. Yeah? They're all exaggerations, you know. To give an example, somebody makes a remark and that stands out. Okay? Somebody makes a remark and that stands out for you. Interestingly, nobody in the room reacted to that. But somehow, it hit you. Right? That's fine, because that's also the variety of karmas we have. Right? Okay, now, we notice it and think, well, that sounded hostile to me. You know? But the thing is, we usually don't even say that sounded hostile to me. Right? That just like, well, that sounded hostile. When in fact, yeah, it should be, the full sentence should be, to me. Footnote, this is no excuse for gaslighting or whatever version of that you're, okay. Wait, is it me? It's always you. Obviously, we are all programmed to be sensitive to threat. And that's why we're still here. Okay, so there is a role for that. You know? There's a purpose for that. But some of these, I would say, are so ancient in our DNA that they have lost a purpose. We no longer live in a world where all these ancient tendencies are still alive and necessary. You know? So that book called Why Buddhism is True, if you're looking for a book to read, ignore the title. It's a little obnoxious. But the book is really good. I think it's a New Yorker contributor. It's
Robert Wright.
Yeah, that writes about basically, I mean, he's not a scientist himself, but he translates evolutionary psychology and evolutionary theory, the discoveries there, and how the basic teachings of the Buddha illuminates a lot of what's going on in the way we react to things. Yeah? So like, for example, he said, yes, the kind of instinct, so to say, right? To stand up for yourself when someone, right, takes advantage of you. He said, back when we all lived in the same village, and there's 25 families, that was perhaps necessary. Because after all, you know, right, 10,000 years ago, it's hard to stay alive, you know, and everyone wants to stay alive. And sometimes that means depriving someone else next door from being alive. And so, you know, addressing the slight kind of made sense 10,000 years ago. But now you're driving on the highway, someone cuts you off, and it triggers that response, is completely useless. You're never going to see that person again. The person really doesn't matter. But it kicks off, right? These responses that gets us all out of shape for no more purpose. So anyway, that's that book. So we come back here, yeah? Obviously, we're all programmed to be sensitive to threat. Based on that program, a felt meaning of those words occurs that will shape our actions and reactions around that experience. A similar process could, of course, occur over them not expressing the gratitude or the consideration that we expect. Here, the bias is our sensitivity around not being welcome or respected. In either case, if such impressions are not filtered by deep attention, if we are lacking in that training to pay attention, to pay appropriate attention, to understand and recognize that is what's going on, yeah? Then the underlying bias is not revealed and checked. True, there can be threat, but is this actually a threat? Yeah? And what is threatened? Does this really mean I am unwelcome? We don't pause, you know, usually, because it immediately, right, flips the switch on that particular program that we're used to. Bearing in mind the fact that a lot of actions are not accompanied by deliberate intention, but by muddled impulses, a review is worthwhile. Otherwise, if there is inadequate attention to the qualities that are affecting the citta, the mind conceives self and other based on that felt meaning. Then it proliferates and magnifies the experience in line with the intensity of the initial impression. And we get overwhelmed with proliferating views such as deliberate, aimed at me, and he always ... A fatalist view can also get established. I always have to put up with inconsiderate people. I always have to put up with people who don't appreciate me. Yeah? It's like a lot of people, from one perspective, care so much about you that they go out of their way, you know, to inconvenience you, and to not pay attention to you. I mean, that's the conceit that we have. Which, you know, once things calm down, and if you look at it that way, you're like, probably not. Maybe something else is going on. But in the moment, that's not how we look at things, you know. We could see things another way. We could shrug off the incident and decide not to engage with our interpretation. The remark was just a remark. Now, you could do that, right? But please don't tell people you're doing that. You're also not training to be a doormat to anyone. And this is an important footnote. It's not in here, I'm just saying. This is an important footnote. So we have a tradition in Tibetan Buddhist teachings called the training the altruistic mind, lojong. It says that when you practice Lojong, you do it secretly. Otherwise, you invite trouble. Yeah, meaning, yeah, don't, because, yeah, maybe, some people do enjoy treating others as doormat. And just because you are training this doesn't mean you become a doormat. So best not to tell people what you're up to. Keep it a secret, It says, well, we could shrug off the incident and decide not to engage with our interpretation. The remark was just a remark. But more to the point is to put aside adjudicating over the situation. There's no end to adjudicating the situation. But instead, look to clearing the proliferations. True enough, if we feel that others are being disrespectful or downright hostile, well, maybe they are. Yeah, maybe they are. But can we refrain from the proliferations that stick in our heart and add more negative patterns? Yeah. So it's beside the point in a way, whether they are or they are not. You can deal with that next step. First step, protect your own heart. Yeah, in a way you could say, yeah, maybe they are, so they have harmed you on one level. Do you want that harm to go to the deeper level? Or you halt that first? Now, this is what it's saying. Again, it's not to become a doormat. Yeah? But first, protect your heart from those proliferations. What is more accurate is not that she's always like this, but that this habitual experience of mistrust, etc., arises when she says that. Or when I look at that expression on her face. First that, Then, when you have things under control, yeah, then you can say, hey, stop that. Through attending deeply, you can notice that although proliferation floods the citta with details, it deprives you of full presence. Steady bodily presence gets lost, as does your ability to respond carefully and mindfully. That loss is a mark of ignorance. It robs you of groundedness, empathy, and clarity. What is needed then is mindfulness of the heart, with the patience to allow a compassionate response to self and other as they arise in your awareness. The meditation for this chapter is interesting. He says, you do it while standing. While standing up. There's something about that. Related to not being a doormat. And being grounded. Often when citta gets stirred, that aspect of the heart that registers the impressions, the heart impressions, often when that is thrown off course, we lose groundedness. Physically, we're not present. And that adds to the feeling of powerlessness. And then it then triggers all that, the whole program. The program of suffering comes out very powerfully, very strongly. This next section is how this response is the direct practice of Kalyana Mitta. It begins with finding someone who models stability, empathy, and clarity. A person who does more than say some well-meaning things, but also has the capacity to listen deeply without getting phased or reactive. If you resonate with such a person, other qualities flow on. You meet, take in, and feel the gist of what the speaker is saying. A Kalyana Mitta may or may not act as a teacher, but in any case has the respect to not barge in with lectures and what you need to do. This is because a true Kalyana Mitta understands that the chitta, each of our chitta, can only learn from its own deep attention. That the purpose of wise companionship is to help us to listen to ourselves with dispassion. So this is telling those who wear the hat of teachers how to actually be good for others. I will repeat it. This is because a true Kalyana Mitta, so as you go about your lives, not just in the context of a Dharma center, a spiritual place, as you go about your life, there are Kalyana Mittas in our midst. Learn how to recognize who they are and really benefit from being around them. And also learn not to get yourself involved with those who look like they're Kalyana Mittas, but want to be Kalyana Mittas, but maybe not. So here it says, this is because a true Kalyana Mitta understands that the chitta can only learn from its own deep attention, that the purpose of wise companionship is to help us to listen to ourselves with dispassion, with the coolness of the heart. Kalyana Mitta is thus about encouraging the Dharma that's knowable in oneself, meaning the Dharma is something that you can know within yourself. If there are helpful teachers, if there are helpful friends, they are always pointing you in that direction. You have to, but you can see the truth of these teachings within yourself. And that starts with a theme that I've been saying. You can and you should translate what you're hearing for yourself. And learn to trust that. Not like a hard-headedness, right? There is a dance, there is a balance between the attitude of I don't know, but also I do know. Right? And sifting through that of I don't know, but I do know. There's no easy formula for that. Yeah? And as you go in this dance of I don't know, but I do know, over time, you gain to trust your own capacity for goodness. The hiri again, conscience. And as you have more of this conscience, you have the capacity to have more concern for others' ability to be good and their capacity to manifest that good. The trust of another helps us to learn to trust our own capacities. It is an act of faith. Otherwise, becoming and conceit come up with the assumption that there's something wrong with me and I have to do something to make myself other than I am. This type of self-view cannot succeed. You can never win if you buy into this. But clearing ignorance and imbalance this is important, doesn't happen through simply affirming, there's nothing wrong with me. It also cannot happen that way. Yeah? That's just another self-view. Moreover, conceiving based on fortunate states such as I'm a genius, enlightened, keeps needing more of the affirmation, approval, or adoration of others. That's also imbalance. Clearing these imbalances only comes through suspending the assumption I am for a while and giving deep attention to qualities and energies that cause or release stress. So if you want to be a true Dharma friend to another, encourage this and model this. To become a true friend, you don't need to be full of ideas. The true friend begins in yourself through cultivating and relating to balance ease in the body that helps to cut off self-other proliferation. Aspects of the body may still get stirred by emotions, but the body doesn't proliferate. So you can listen deeply, feel and be affected. Feel and be affected. But not fabricate self and other out of that. Just leave it. Instead, when there is an emotional surge, you widen and extend awareness from the activated parts. And often, physically, where is it activated? Abdomen. That's one place where all the muscles, tighten up. Chest. And then face. Yeah, it's like this tightens up, right? Often this tightens up first, then this tightens up, then this tightens up. Yeah. And sometimes the way to deal with in such a situation is not through mind. It's recognizing these parts tightening and then setting aside the story and say, relax, the face. And broaden the space. And relax these muscles. So you extend awareness from the activated parts. So extend them. To include the back, the legs and the feet, so that the energy of the stirred up state can level out and even discharge. This is on the energetic level. Body and mind, they're completely connected. Sometimes you come at it from the mind side, the heart side. Sometimes you come at it from the body side. So this brings the heart and mind into balance, and it is only from that basis that you can get a feel for simple threads of emotional ease and psychological space. It is a shift from being tense or on guard to something more trusting, something intimate, but not personal. Through attending to this firm but open state, you can step back from the personal biases, interpretations, old narratives and judgments. The natural result is true balance. As heart energy settles, you can extend the quality of that trust and benevolent intent into all the tissues and structures of the body. Then extend that into the space around you. May all this be free from harm and stress. You can then more specifically extend that to impressions of other people, especially those who mean a lot to you, both good and bad, either friends or people you have difficulties with. Through meeting the qualities that come up as you attend to self and others, you cultivate merit, you cultivate value. And from there, you become a field of merit. And only when you become a field of merit can what's around you become a field of merit. And wherever you go, there is the possibility of discovering fields of merit, a community of value. It's a lot more in this chapter. You can tell I'm a fan of this book. I hope this series on karma has at the very least invited you to further explore this topic. And whatever you think or thought karma was, maybe they're not so accurate. Actually, the Buddha says, the general contours of teachings about karma is not difficult to understand. And the general contours of what karma is and how karma works is what we need to work with. But he also says, but don't kind of zoom into the level of like, what exactly caused this? And what is the exact effect of that? He says, that will lead to a thicket of views, opinions, ideas. So these teachings on karma is, in a way, you can say, something to be discovered with this body. Not this. With this body. And so he pays so much attention to, in all the guided meditation, to the felt sense of this body. How is the body reacting? How is the body becoming tight, becoming spacious, depending on what kind of karma has been put in place, and what kind of karma is producing what kind of karma. So a lot of attention to this body. For those of you who are familiar with this other system, in the text, in this 12th century Tibetan text called the Gongjik, it's a forte, so to say, of the lineage that I'm a part of. There's one statement there that has caused, other Buddhists to say, wait, what? That's wrong. The founder said, in confused existence, in samsara, it's the body that wanders. On the surface, it seems to contradict the general idea that, it's the mind that is reborn. Like wonder is that connotation. What continues, what wanders on in suffering. And he says, in confused existence, in samsara, it's the body that wanders. Can't understand it here. Maybe can understand here. But you start with this. So he provides this exercise. So maybe you guys can try this. One more thing. This I highlighted. I thought I'll read to you. It doesn't really continue from what we're talking about, but this is good. He says, now I'm not saying that matters of behavior aren't to be addressed. I talked about that, right? That's one of the values of spiritual friendship. So when we are in a community of value, he says, I'm not saying matters of behavior aren't to be addressed. That's one of the values of spiritual friendship. But it is the values of integrity and empathy that have to be steadily practiced, and not law and order, and not rules, and not, well, in this community we don't dot 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 and dot dot dot. But rather the values of integrity and empathy. Integrity ourselves, empathy towards others. Yeah? This has to be consistently applied, whether it's here, whether it's your home, whether it's your workplace, your neighborhood. Yeah? Nor is this about understanding others. This is interesting. Nor is this about understanding others or being understood by others. That also is an impossible wish. No one can view another's karmically conditioned mindset. It is difficult enough to get some insight into one's own. The correct approach is to replace these aspects of self-view with a mutual exploration of what arises in any situation or with any intention. This is right view. It rules out proliferating over a specific piece of behavior and turning it into the view that only this is right, or she's one of those, or if I follow the rules, I'll be safe and no one will find fault with me. Not so. The fault-finding mind will object to your smile, or to what you didn't say, or to your own non-smile. So it is not about trying to understand others. That's secondary. He's not saying that you don't do that, but that's secondary, or even wanting to be understood. Again, there's no end to that. Stop. So the first thing is stop the proliferating, the churning out. So, we have come to the end of tonight and to this particular series. As I say, the following Thursdays, for a while, we can still linger on this book. So come and join us if you have time. What else? Oh, right. What else? Oh, right. This weekend, freedom from fears. Yeah. Quite full, actually, the physical space. I mean, if everyone who said they're going to come comes, it's quite full. So it's 10 to 2. There will be breaks in between, but we're not going to have a lunch break. So have your brunch and come. Or bring a banana or apple and chomp away while we finish. So each day is from 10 to 2. Yeah. You can come to only one day. If you can't come both days, it's fine. If you like magic, come on Sunday. If you can't stand magic, don't come on Sunday. Yeah, you can also come in person if you're local on one day and then get on Zoom on the other day. Then in that case, maybe if you're going to do that, then maybe Zoom on Saturday and then Sunday, because it's a ritual occasion that is a little odd. But we do what we can, If you're not local, then what to say? Something's better than nothing. Yeah? But if you're local, and then it's, I don't know. So we will conclude, as Emily's reminded us, we'll conclude by taking a moment to do what we call dedicating merit, dedicating this field of merit, dedicating this field of value. And so in this sense, we say you cannot dedicate what you don't have. You know? But interestingly, it's not that hard to have. Because even if you feel you don't have that value, you don't have that merit, you say, I don't have that community yet, I don't have that field. It says in the teachings, you can think of the fields that other people have, take that and dedicate that. You can take the historical Buddha's field of merit. Because the way these fields work is it actually doesn't belong to anyone. There's an aspect that emphasizes how you create the merit. Yeah? For sure. After all, one of the big points about karma is you can do something about it. But then on another level, it doesn't belong to anyone. These are public fields. And so even when you feel impoverished, you can still dedicate. Yeah? You can still dedicate. You dedicate other people's fields. And other people don't get to sue you for this. Because that's not how it works. So that's the interesting thing about, finding and creating these fields of merit. Yeah? In one sense, yes, you have to work on it. You have to work hard on it. In another sense, no, it doesn't belong to you or anyone. So therefore you can dedicate it to all beings everywhere. Yeah? So take a moment to reflect on this. Yeah? May I create these fields of merit. May I be a field of merit. And in being a field of merit, may it cause others to also become fields of merit, fields of value, communities of value, so that we are all guided by this conscience, hiri, and concern, ottappa. May all beings be free from suffering, both physical and mental. May they find happiness, both physical and mental. Excellent and precious bodhicitta, where it has not arisen, may it arise. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but increase higher and higher. Chanju sem chorim poche ma ge pa nang ge gyur che ge pa nyam pa me pa yang gong ne gong du pe war shu. Tomorrow is the start of the Tibetan New Year. It's called Losar. Lo is year, Sar is new. So tomorrow is the first day of the snake year according to the Tibetan calendar. So of course Tibetan people and related peoples, tomorrow starts celebrating But within the Buddhist context, Tibetans also identify the first 15 days of this new year, that kind of coincides with the new year, to a period of time in the Buddha's life. It is said that during these 15 days, the historical Buddha did something unusual, which is that he successively on these 15 days performed a series of, lack of better translation, a series of miracles. It's said that after debating, according to the telling, after debating with all those different philosophies, different philosophers, different teachers, different views, and defeating them in clarifying the truth, he then had to do 15 days of Jedi mind tricks. Basically, right? Miracles. So what does this mean? It is saying that there is the logical side, that can accept reasoning. But then there are deeper stuff going on that can only be overcome and overwhelmed by a display of the impossible. And so this is what he did for these 15 days. So then, according to the tradition, they say, if you remember this during these 15 days, if you remember this, like the significance of these 15 days, and then do anything, body, speech, and mind, that is of value, of merit, bright karma, that bright karma can be multiplied, the effects, by millions and millions of times. Sound like cheating, but it's pretty good, yeah. So in that sense of it's a heightened period where this fields can grow bigger and bigger if you remember the significance of these 15 days. Yes, so go with that. Yeah.